Good afternoon, everyone. If today's presentation, PAS-55, Effective Asset Management Strategies. If you are here to see that, you're in the right place. This is Bill Partapillo. I'm going to be your moderator today. And today we have James Nesbitt from Asset Performance Technologies, who's going to be presenting for us.
All right, Bill, thank you very much. This is James Nesbitt with APG. Today we're going to be talking about effective asset management strategies as they pertain to PAS-55. This is part of the ongoing series. If you check both Reliability Web or our website at apgassetcare.com, you can find the other webinars, which are the introduction and the policy and now the strategies. And next year you'll see this continue with the objectives and the plans. So it's part of our entire PAS-55 presentation that goes from right through the specification. So let's get started here. Who is APG? APG is a asset solution company out of Canada. We've been around since about 2003. Some of our key partnerships, the one in the middle there, the Institute of Asset Management. The Institute of Asset Management, of course, is the organization that developed the PAS-55 specification, and we're endorsed through them as assessors. What are we going to be looking at today? I'm going to do a quick overview of PAS-55 for those of you who aren't familiar with the specification. We're going to talk specifically about asset management strategies and what they are and an example of how to apply them. What makes strategy PAS-55 compliant, and of course what makes it effective. And then at the end we're gonna have some question and answer. Publicly available specification, PAS-55. One important thing to remember is that it's a specification. It is not a standard. The specification was developed by the Institute of Asset Management and is administered by the British Standards Institute, BSI, but is a specification and not a standard. It was first published in 2004. The Institute for Asset Management is based in the UK, based in London. And a lot of excitement around this standard when it first came out in the UK and in Europe. In 2006, they came out with the assessment methodology. The assessment methodology is a number of questions or criteria that you can either have your organization evaluate against or evaluate your organization against it on your own. The assessment methodology is available to all members of the IAM and can be found at their website, which is theiam.org. In 2007, it became an Ofgem requirement. And Ofgem is the Office for Gas and Electric Markets in the UK. And requirement, from what I've read and understand, a requirement may be a strong word there. It's a very strong suggestion that the PAS-55 standard would be a good, or see, I said standard. This PAS-55 specification would be a good framework for gas and electric markets. In 2008, they published the current version, and it includes updates, as you can read there, from 50 organizations and about 1,300 suggestions. When you're looking at the PAS-55 booklets or documentation, they really come in two parts. Part one is the specification itself, and it's very, very concise and outlines what the specification is. Part two goes into more detail, and they call it implementation guidance, but it's really just interpretation and suggestions for application of PAS-55. And it's called PAS-55-2, and it's just a lot more detail around it. Interesting enough, PAS-55 as a specification is the basis of an ISO standard. So the ISO organization took a look at the asset management specification that the IAM had developed, and it actually fast-tracked the need for a ISO standard based on that specification. So they've started to build the international teams, and we should see some activity around the development of the ISO standard in 2011. So that's really exciting. And the ISO standard right now, I believe, is ISO 55000, based, of course, on PAS-55. So what is asset management? When I talk about asset management seminars or to organizations, there's really three things that pop to people's mind, it may pop to people's mind. First one is mutual funds and financial portfolios, management of your financial assets. So PAS-55 doesn't cover that. The other common misconception that is in almost every organization or person I talk to is that PAS-55 is a maintenance specification. And I think a lot of that has been fostered by CMMS vendors that are positioning their software to support PAS-55, or even service providers that align their organization to PAS-55. They're typically in the maintenance environment and try to put a real maintenance slant on the PAS-55 specification. But it's not that. It is asset management and asset management for the organization. Now, this is the definition that was given by the Institute for Asset Management, and I love it, so I'm just going to read it. And it says that asset management is the core business for organizations that are heavily dependent on physical equipment, systems, and infrastructure. So it's not, asset management isn't new. It's not in addition to what we do, we being the stewards of asset-intensive organizations. It's not in addition to what we do, it is what we do. So this encompasses all aspects of acquisition or investing, operating, maintaining, and disposing or renewing the asset. It's full life cycle. This slide is a high-level overview of the PAS-55 specification. And if we start at the top, we can see that we have the corporate organizational goals, or the strategic goals. What is the direction of the company? Where are they going? What do they see as their markets? What do they see as their competitive advantage? What do they see as their differentiator? And how are they going to exploit those? Below that, we have managed asset portfolio, capital investment optimization to achieve those organizational goals. From there, we have to manage the asset systems, and then at the very lowest level, the life cycle of the assets. How are we going to create or acquire them? How are we going to operate them or utilize them? What's our maintenance strategy around those assets? And then at the end of its life, what are we going to do to renew or dispose of those assets? So if we take everything from the managed asset portfolio down, that's really what is encompassed by the PAS-55 asset management system. PAS-55 doesn't identify your corporate organizational or strategic goals, but it aligns the organization to where the strategic goals are looking to take you. PAS-55, when you read the PAS-55 specification, they're very, very specific on the description of providing good practices for business and a good framework for asset management. They don't claim to be the best practice. And the reason for that is that there's different best practices across industries. And even within industries, there may be best practices that are different from organization to organization based on your business, your market variables, based on competitive or product variables. So what they talk about is good practice. And it talks about, in most cases, what needs to be done, not how. They want to build a fully integrated asset management system. We read some of that. It needs to be sustainable and systematic and based on risk, and needs to encompass the whole organization or the part of the organization that you're focusing on. So when you're applying PAS-55, you can apply it holistically across your organization. You may want to try it on one plant or one operation within one plant, depending on your strategy for implementation or your understanding of the benefit that you wish to receive. Structure of PAS-55. This really breaks down the pyramid diagram to a little bit more detail. So you can see at the top, we start with the organizational strategic plan, and it's going to feed all of the lower elements. First one is the policy. How are we as asset managers going to align to the organizational strategic plan? Below that, you can see very closely coupled our asset management strategy, that which we're going to do a deeper dive on today, and the asset management objectives that are derived from the strategy. And then below that, the asset management plans, I call this where the rubber meets the road, the tactical plans that they are the actions and responsibilities, what we're going to do, or the implementation of what we're going to do based on the strategy. Below that, you can see that they're applied to a portfolio of assets based on, of course, life cycle again, but also based on the business environment. Some organizations may have one portfolio of assets. If you have a large organization that has a number of plants that all perform the same type of function, create the same types of material in the same market, you'll likely have one portfolio of asset systems. But if you're very diversified, if you have regulated electrical generation and gas transmission and maybe nuclear power or discrete manufacturing, all within the same organization, you're going to need a number of different asset systems, because how you manage each of those portfolios of assets will change based on the business environment. Now, today we're going to talk about strategy. Strategy is derived from the policy, and again, the policy is aligned to the organizational goals. So PAS-55, a large discipline within PAS-55 is alignment right from goals to action. So the policy is the bridge between the organizational goals and the strategy. Policy is what are we going to do and how are we going to manage it, and the strategy is, well, how do I take that direction and turn it into objectives and plans. First part, establish, document, implement, and maintain a long-term asset strategy which will be authorized from top management. So PAS-55 is a very top-down driven approach. It's not meant to be a grassroots approach. Although it can be used as a framework to help you understand where all of these components may fit into your organization, in order to be successful, it needs really to be driven down. So PAS-55 states that strategy must be established and documented. It should include information around the strategy in detail, the process and the participants who were involved in its creation, as well as specify the objectives associated to the strategy. The strategy may be broken down into functional areas or organizational goals or some other natural grouping. There will be multiple strategies, just as there are multiple policies. So for every policy that you have that relates to safety, relates to process safety, relates to asset maintenance, operations, capital acquisitions, each of those policies will have a strategy for how you're going to implement it. Most of all, each strategy must drive the objectives at all levels. It must form the basis for the incentive programs and form the basis for individual performance. How do I know at a director, manager, supervisor, shop floor level how well I'm performing based on the organization's goals? The PAS-55 strategy criteria. If we look at what we did with the policy, the 12 elements of the strategy can be broken down into really 5 categories. So you can see here on the right, we have each of the 12 strategy elements detailed. But really what they're looking for is to drive consistency, consideration, functions, be specific, and compliance. So consistency. Is the strategy consistent with the policies and organizational objectives? Is it consistent with other policies and strategies? So do we, are we sure that all of the stakeholders have been counseled and that our strategy doesn't affect negatively or take away from other strategies that we're trying to accomplish, and that we're all moving ahead towards the same goals. Consideration. Does the strategy account for the needs of stakeholders? Does it consider the entire life cycle of the assets that you're managing? Does it consider risk and criticality? And is it communicated and understood? Function. Does the strategy identify the function, performance, and condition of the assets? Specific. Does the strategy state the approach and methods? Is it detailed enough that I can implement and measure it? And then, of course, compliance. Is there a process for reviewing and maintaining the strategy? And we'll go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. Consistency. From the previous slides, we can see that PAS-55 is a very top-down approach. What are my organizational objectives? How do those align to my policies? And then how do my policies align to my strategies? So ensuring that everything is aligned. One of the traps or pitfalls that I've seen is between operations and maintenance. Operations strategy is keep the machine running, and maintenance is often to get the machine from the operations organization in order to do a reasonable amount of maintenance. If those two groups aren't talking and aren't including each other in their strategies, they're actually going to be at odds. So that's what this looks to resolve. Consideration. As we mentioned, there's going to be a number of different strategies, but each of the strategies needs to consider the stakeholders. Stakeholders can be operations and maintenance. It can be customer. It can be shareholders. It could also be community, the community in which the organization operates. It needs to take a look at the entire life cycle. So you may have different strategies for acquisition, for creation of assets versus operation, maintain, and dispose. It needs to consider risk and criticality. You need to focus on the key assets first and ensure that there's a comprehensive strategy for those assets that contribute the most or have the largest consequence to the business or the community, and usually in the form of safety or environment. Remember, there's not a single strategy, but many that are aligned. Function. When we're considering function, we need to consider both current and future functions. If we're looking at the current function, can it do what we want it to, or it is intended to do at the rate we need it to do it at? Is that rate going to be consistent, or are we going to ask it to do more or less in the future? What's its current condition? Is it capable of doing what we want? No level of asset management will enable a substandard equipment to perform the way you need it to for a sustained period of time. So we need to make sure that the asset conditions, both its current condition and its future condition, are capable of delivering what we need it to deliver. And then, of course, performance. What is the historical performance? Are we operating and maintaining it in such a way that we're able to produce the performance we need, or are we very reactive? Or as I've seen numerous times, do we supplement poor performance with additional capacity or additional capital in the form of redundant lines or redundant trains? It needs to be specific. In the strategy, you need to outline what the approach and methods you're going to use. What's your objectives and plans? It needs to drive the objectives. You should be able to take your strategy and build your objectives right from it. It's not high level. It's not we will strive to be the best, but it will be we will identify our critical equipment and use EPRI international standards and for equipment and risk, and have a clear understanding of all future or of all single point failure conditions by the end of 2012. So it's very, very specific to what we're trying to do. So from there, I can easily build what my objectives are. Right? So an understanding of all single point failure conditions may be my objective. By when? By 2012. Right? What tools are we going to apply? We may use life cycle costing, block modeling, RCM, Six Sigma. All of those need to be outlined and specific in your strategy document. Compliance. To be reviewed periodically, ensure that it remains effective and consistent. This is something that you're going to see throughout the PAS-55 specification. a focus on continual improvement, a focus on driving the framework into the culture of the organization. PAS-55, or the implementation of the PAS-55 specification, isn't a project. It isn't an event. It's part of how we're going to do our business. Now we're going to spend a few minutes looking at the structure of the strategy. And very much like the policy structure, we're going to start with a scope statement, a framework statement, and an impact statement. So the scope statement provides a link to the organizational goals and policies. So this is what policies are we addressing, and in turn, what organizational goals do those policies address. The framework statement include a time horizon and how will we meet the policies. And then the impact, what do we expect to get out of this? So here I have a little example, a scope statement. Scope statement is really what we're trying to accomplish. The asset management strategy should always begin with a commitment from top managers. It needs to be aligned with the business objectives and policies of the organization. This example that we're going to look at is a capital acquisition strategy. So in order to remain competitive and solidify our position as a low-cost manufacturer of high-grade kraft pulp, the environmental paper company will invest X millions to upgrade our pulp machines to the best-in-class standards. In support of our employees and customers, this investment will include state-of-the-art safety and environmental management improvements, enabling EPC to drive towards zero lost time accidents and neutral environmental impact. So very, very specifically what we're trying to do. The framework statement. Framework statement tells us how we're going to do that. So from the framework statement, we should be able to drive objectives, and we should be able to measure objectives based on this. So EPC will evaluate the full life cycle cost of this investment and will strategically phase in the replacement of our existing pulp machines over a 5-year period. Machines that pose the greatest risk to operation, safety, environment will be upgraded or replaced first. So very specific about how we're going to do it. And the impact statement. Why are we doing this? The strategy, the measures, and the objectives. And it puts performance standards around what we're going to do. So we anticipate that upon completion, EPC will have removed X million in annual costs from the business and will have positioned us as the safest and most environmentally friendly pulp manufacturer in North America. So very specific about why we're doing this and what we expect to get out of this. These are going to drive as well the objectives that are a result of the strategy. So if we go through each of the 12 elements of the strategy, PAS-55 strategy, to be derived from and consistent with the asset management policy and the organizational strategic plan. So here, to remain competitive and solidify our position as a low-cost manufacturer in high-grade kraft pulp. Other things to consider when we're deriving and being consistent with the asset management policy is stakeholder requirements, expectations that will influence the management of the assets, regulatory requirements, statutory or legal requirements. What is the existing asset management strategy? Do we need to have a transition plan from what we're doing now to where we want to go? Changes in priorities that the organization is aware of or might arise in the future. What are the markets doing? What is our position? What are our competitors doing? And how do we align to compete or deal with any of those variables? Asset deterioration mechanisms. Methods for determining optimal operating and maintenance strategies, including resources, task justifications and intervals, processes and procedures and standards, getting some of the block and tackle process needs in place. Things like opportunities to achieve asset management strategy in a more cost-effective way, or opportunities to add value to existing strategies or existing processes in your organization. Be consistent with other organizational policies and strategies. Again, ensuring that we're not competing. So here, drive towards zero lost time accidents and neutral environmental impact. So aligning, in this case, to the safety and environmental policies. Identify and consider the requirements of the relevant stakeholders. Who is this going to affect? Where do my inputs come from? Where do my outputs go? And who benefits from this strategy? So here, in support of our customers and employees. And environmental paper company, the organization is a stakeholder. Zero lost time accidents and neutral environmental impacts. So the community and again our employees. The strategy must consider the life cycle management requirements of the assets. So here, since this is a capital acquisition policy, we will evaluate the full life cycle cost of this investment as we're acquiring equipment. When it comes to life cycle management requirements of the assets, you may have separate strategies that are based on each of the life cycle components. We may have a strategy that tells you how to acquire or create assets. We may have another policy that tells us how we're going to maintain them and operate them, and potentially a fourth that tells us how we're going to dispose of them. Takes account the asset-related risks, asset and asset system criticalities. So part of this exercise, in this case, we're going to replace the machines that pose the greatest risk. But in the strategy, you may even want to identify what the criteria for evaluating asset criticality or asset risk are going to be in order to ensure that we're measuring them consistently with the policies and the other policies within the organization. Identify the functions, performance, and condition of the existing asset systems and critical assets. So we may analyze criticality and risk at this point. We may take a look at the initial condition assessment of our assets. What needs to be replaced? In this case, of course, those that pose the greatest risks are the ones that we're going to look at. But that needs to be clearly identified in your strategy. What am I trying to do? What functions do I need? And what performance standards do I need from those functions in order to reach my organizational goals? And we don't just look at what my goals are today. So what is state the desired functions, performance, and condition of existing and new asset systems and critical assets on timescales aligned to those of the organizational strategic plan. So what do I want to do today? What do I want to do tomorrow? How am I going to get there? And what is the time period for getting there? And what is the performance standard once I arrive? So here we're looking at a capital replacement strategy over a 5-year period. And when we're finished, we're going to reduce the annual cost of operating and maintaining that equipment. And we will be positioned as the safest and the most environmentally friendly pulp manufacturer in North America. So criteria that we can measure, criteria that is what we call SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Clearly state the approach and principal methods by which the assets and the asset systems will be managed. This is a replacement strategy. Again, it talks about how we're going to do it. We're going to look at full cycle costs during the acquisition of the investment. We're going to replace the existing machines, and of course, we're going to do those in an order based on safety and environment. It may also talk about things that are more tactical. So if we look at maintenance, for example, we may in our strategy decide to implement a root cause failure analysis using the Apollo or the people and processes practices. We may decide to apply RCM2, or we may decide to apply Six Sigma to our Lean Six Sigma to our operations. But it needs to be clear and it needs to be specific. Provide sufficient information, direction, and guidance to enable specific asset management objectives and asset management plans to be produced. The strategy talks about how we're going to implement the policy. The output of the strategy, of course, are objectives. How are we going to measure that? How are we going to know that we're successful? those objectives are tied to the performance of the individuals in the organization and tied to the performance of the assets. From there, we're going to drive plans. These are the actions that we're going to execute in order to realize the strategy. So the strategy needs to be clear enough to drive both those objectives and the plans. Include criteria for optimizing and prioritizing asset management objectives and plans. Really a lot the same as the last one, but taking a look at, in this case, safety, environment, operations cost, and production. Overall, communication. This is another standard clause that you'll find throughout PAS-55. To be communicated to all relevant stakeholders, including contract service providers, where there's a requirement these persons be made aware of their asset management strategy-related obligations. And just like the policy, the PAS-55 policy, there may be things in your strategy that are company confidential that you don't want to release to outside organizations such as consultants or contractors. So you may have two versions of your strategy, one that's the internal and one that gives the information needed to contractors and consultants or any other third party that may be doing work with your organization and has a need to know what the strategy is. And that is strategy. We're going to open it up to some questions. This slide here just it shows our web page address where you can download all of the prior PAS-55 presentations, as well as this one. Usually within a week or 10 days, these will be posted up on that site. They're also available from reliabilityweb.com.
Outstanding presentation, James. Very, very good. As James said, we'd like to open it up to some questions now, and you can text them in the upper right-hand corner there. James, we've got one that came in here. Strategy, does it, let's see here, does the strategy mean that it's looking at a policy deployment? You had referenced that earlier.
Absolutely, yeah. The strategy needs to be aligned to one or more policies. So the strategy is the bridge between taking the policy around how we're going to manage those assets, whether it be, again, through capital acquisition or maintenance, and details how we're going to do it. A strategy may be aligned to more than one policy, and a policy may have more than one strategy depending on the complexity of the policy and the breadth of the strategy that you're trying to implement. For example, business process mapping may have an impact on most of the policies in your organization. It will certainly have an impact on any operation or maintenance and acquisition policies that you have. So it will cover a large breadth of the policies that you have. It may not be tied specifically to one.
All right, excellent. And we're getting a couple of questions in here again on is this presentation going to be recorded? Yes, it certainly is going to be recorded and will be on Reliability Web for future playback. So again, if anyone has any other questions, please do go ahead and text them in while we do have James online here. All right.
Sometimes we get a lot of questions, sometimes not too many.
Yeah, it looks like we're not having a whole lot of questions today, James.
Okay, well, it was either a really good presentation or I bored them.
No, I don't think you bored them. I thought it was a very, very good presentation. And again, I just want to remind everyone that this will be up on Reliability Web for playback. And I do want to thank James for taking the time today to present on PAS-55. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. And everyone have a super wonderful day.
Thanks, Bill. I just wanted to add that the webinars will be continuing, so our plan is to continue these through 2011. And the next one is likely to be objectives followed by plans. So we'll continue to walk through the specification.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for your time again today, James. And I'll end on this wonderful comments people are texting back here. So thank you again for your time, James.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. All right, bye-bye.